ice cream. All the ice cream in my house, in the world, and most of my stuffed animals.
My video games and, my phone.
What would you give for your freedom? Would you give your eyesight? Would you give ever seeing the sunset again? Would you give the ability to see your children's future? Thousands of brave men and women who served in the United States Armed Forces have given their eyesight in defense of our freedom. And the Blinded Veterans Association wants to give them their freedom back, but it needs your help. Go to BVA.org to find out about how BVA's free programs and services, advocacy, education, peer support, scholarships, and more help America's heroes to not just deal with the emotional and physical issues of sudden sight loss or impairment, but actually work to get them back to the independent lives they deserve to live. Go to BVA.org to find out how you can make a difference. They fought for your independence, and by going to BVA.org, you can find out how to help these veterans regain theirs. Go to BVA.org today.
You're listening to W4TB Radio from the Wisdom for the Blind Studios in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where we share some wisdom to help you navigate the seas to stay in calm waters. Please visit us on the web at w4tb.org or drop us an email at feedback@w4tb.org. You can also download the W4TB radio app at the Apple Store or Google Play. Please share the knowledge and tell a friend. Now, back to the show. The United States Department of Veterans Affairs is a cabinet-level executive branch department of the federal government, charged with providing lifelong health care services to eligible military veterans at the 170 VA medical centers in the United States. And that's where we come in. Live from the Wisdom for the Blind Studios in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, this is InSight to the VA. The VA is there to help us. Let's get started. Welcome to InSight to the VA. InSight to the VA. With your host, Benjamin Keeley.
Thank you, Keith, for such a great introduction. You always make me sound and look good. I appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the newest episode of InSight to the VA, where we bring you the latest information on what's happening in the VA and how it's there to help you. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the Caregivers Act. We got a great program lined up. The first thing we're going to do is we're just going to overview what the program is all about. Then we're going to have a great friend of mine. He's going to be joining us on the second segment, Mr. Don Overton, the executive director of the BVA, the Blinded Veterans Association, based out of D.C. He's going to be talking with us and giving us the latest updates. So first, let's jump in there and let's see what's happening with the Caregivers Act. All right, so let's just jump in and talk about the process for the Caregivers Act. To understand it a little better, what I decided to do is my wife and I went online to the va.gov website, and we filled the application online and decided that we were going to see how the process worked for ourselves. So she jumped onto the website, and she went into the app, and she filled out the application and submitted it. And instantaneously, we got a letter saying, "Thank you very much. We received your application." So that process was pretty good, considering that I had somebody that had good vision and was standing right next to me. I tried to do it by myself, and it was a little difficult because it really wasn't friendly. After a few days, we received an email and a phone call from the VA, and they scheduled an appointment. And that first appointment was with a social worker out of Miami. So we went through that process, and my wife and I got down there, and they interviewed us. It was a bunch of questions about, myself, my wife, how long we've been married, and kind of understanding what my needs were. During this process, I did go over some of the things that I felt was very important as a reason that we needed to apply for the Caregivers Act. One of them would be, I take an insulin every week. I take 100 units of it. And filling that syringe by myself is a little hard. We have to click the needle 100 times. Someone interrupts me, then I got to start all over again. The other thing is that I'm a diabetic, and I also have very bad lymphedema in my legs. So I constantly have my wife check my legs because I can't see below 10 feet. So I'm trying to get a good vision on my eyes to see if there's any ulcers or anything like that. Very difficult, and it's very important. So that's another thing that I can't do on my own. The other thing is making sure that my meds that come in from the VA are working, basically are filled properly, and that I understand what they are and what the dosage is. even though I have a script talk device and the prescriptions from the VA utilize the script talk, I found that if you're not very careful, you can really make some major, major mistakes. One of those issues is when you're putting your meds together, you can't keep another prescription bottle close to the device because the device does not know which one it's trying to read. And many times before when I've done that, I've actually picked up the wrong bottle thinking it's one thing and it's actually another. So word of advice, if you're filling your pill bottles, which is the way that I do it, I fill a pill bottle for the whole week or maybe 2 weeks, and then I use that. So I end up only opening the script talk and all the meds once a week. If you're going to do that, you need to make sure that the other pill bottles are not close to the machine because it will cross over. And I've had many times where prednisone and some of those heart medicines, etc., get mixed up and then I get them confused. So pointing those out to the social worker, she documented them and then, asked my wife a few questions. That was pretty much the realm of that first interview. Once that was done, we were then told that, thank you very much, that was done, that we would get another notification for the next step. The next step was another interview with another person from Miami. And this person asked more questions about, can I cook? Can I bathe myself? Can I dress myself? A lot of the caregiver, normal situations, can I drive, etc. So we went through all those questions. This is where I thought at the point where these questions where we're coming across, we could see that it was not pointing towards somebody that was blind or vision impaired. And from that point, it just got deeper and deeper and deeper into questions that I would say I had no trouble, getting dressed. I had no trouble bathing myself. I can go to the bathroom by myself, all of these things. And we could see that we're now starting to get into the criteria that's in the present regulation. And I felt at that point that this was going to become an issue. I think that the guidelines for the Caregiver Act are not written straight for different medical modalities. It's basically made for a veteran. And just because a veteran needs a caregiver, there's different reasons. You can need a caregiver because you can't get around. You can need a caregiver because you can't feed yourself. You can need a caregiver because you can't take a shower. But nowhere did they ask a question, can I take my own meds? Can I give my own shot? Can I look at my own feet? So I didn't think any of the questions inside the questionnaire was actually suitable for a blind or vision impaired veteran. So the next thing, after the social worker said, thank you, she said somebody would be notifying you and taking you to the next step. About 7 days later, we got a 27-page denial letter stating that I didn't meet the criteria and you're formally denied. And that's when I decided right then, I think we need to have an education to understand what to do next. And that's why I invited a good friend of mine, Mr. Don Overton from the BVA, the Blind Veterans Association, to come and help us understand what's going on and what we should do to move forward. You hear a lot of great things about the Elizabeth Dole Act, making modifications. Back on May 6th, they had a hearing and she talked all about it. I read that bill, and I don't see in the bill where it's going to address the downfalls that we see within the bill. So hopefully, when we get back from break, Don can help us to see what is in the future for this bill and how it's going to serve our blinded brothers and sisters, our vision impaired brothers and sisters, to ensure that they get what's allotted to them and the support they need. So please stay with us, and we'll be right back. This is Ben from Wisdom to the Blind Studios. Please stay with us.
Wisdom for the Blind is dedicated to doing everything we can for the blind and sight impaired. If you'd like to bless us with a donation to keep the website, the podcast, the webinars, and the radio station operating, we can't express how grateful we'd be. You can go to the website at w4tb.org. That's4tb.org, and hit the donation button. Or you can mail it to Wisdom for the Blind Incorporated. Attention donations. 1005 Marina Mile Boulevard, Suite 255, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 33315. Wisdom for the Blind is a not-for-profit 501c3 organization. Remember, it's tax deductible. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts at Wisdom for the Blind.
Thousands of brave men and women who served in the United States Armed Forces have given their eyesight in defense of our freedom. And the Blinded Veterans Association wants to give them their freedom back. But it needs your help. Go to BVA.org to find out about how BVA's free programs, services, advocacy, and more help America's heroes to not just deal with the emotional and physical issues of sudden sight loss or impairment, but actually work to get them back to the independent lives they deserve to live. Go to BVA.org today.
You're listening to Wisdom for the Blind Radio, W4TV, from the studios in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, the home of the Wisdom for Blinded Kids portal. Please enjoy the show, and don't forget to share the wisdom with a friend.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for coming back and sticking with us. And as I told you before the break, I have a good friend of mine, Mr. Don Overton, the Executive Director of the Blind Veterans Association, the BVA. Don, thanks for coming and joining us tonight, man.
Hey, Ben, thanks for having me. Look forward to having this conversation with you, sir.
So our topic tonight is the Caregivers Act. And in the first segment, I went with our guest and we went through what I did. You know, my wife and I just went through the process and we went online, did the application, had the interviews, and at the end of the whole process, got denied. And I'm seeing that a lot with veterans, and I get a lot of phone calls. I'm sure you do too. But what I'd like to do is start off, maybe, number one, tell us a little about yourself, and then jump in and tell us how the program started and what's going on.
Yeah, Ben, and just realize that unfortunately you're not alone. We're seeing denial rates, approximately 85 to 90% of applicants within the program itself since the new rules and regulations were promulgated by the Department of Veterans Affairs a couple of years ago. And so you're experiencing the same thing as so many that should probably have entitlement and eligibility. But yeah, so, you know, I'm a combat disabled veteran myself. I served on the Army side with the 82nd Airborne Division during Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm. I was blinded during combat operations in Iraq back in the 1991 time frame, subsequently medically retired from the military, and I've dedicated the past 30 plus years of my life now, getting older, to advocacy at one level or another, whether that was federal, state, or local levels. And so I've had a passion to serve. I've been an accredited claims representative, so I understand the Veterans Benefits Administration side of the house as well as the Veterans Health Administration. It is always important for folks, I think, to understand, you know, when you look at a piece of legislation as comprehensive as the program for the Comprehensive Family Caregiver Program is really understanding where it started from. And this legislation actually came out back in 2010 as part of the Veterans Omnibus Health Services Act. It was signed into law by then President Obama, and it was the first time that we had a unique opportunity to position caregivers, family caregivers, to direct administer services to their loved ones. It was intended to be a cost savings approach to a lot of catastrophically disabled veterans coming out of the post 9/11 era. So originally the program was limited to just post 9/11 veterans. So somebody would have had to have served after 9/11 to be able to qualify for the original iteration of that legislation. And, you know, it was nice because it was going to support the caregivers with stipends, payments, and it was going to provide health insurance, guaranteed respite care, mental health services, and training and counseling to ensure that the veterans' needs were being met. And it was a two-tiered program. So we had the program for the comprehensive side of the house, but then we also had a second tier, which was known as the Program of General Caregiver Support Services. So we always love acronyms, right? So we had the PCA-FC as well as the PGC-SS. And that second tier was for those that didn't qualify for the higher tier. It was still going to give those caregivers access to training, coaching, educational materials, and additional support services. You know, not soon after that bill was signed into law, the first approved caregivers entered the PCAFC program. And by the end of the first year, within a couple of years, we had about 20,000 family caregivers that were within the program of just those post 9/11 veterans. Fast forward, then from there, the program was really doing well. We got into 2018 and the VA Mission Act, and a lot of folks might remember when the Mission Act went into effect. That was to help on a multitude of levels veterans to be able to access community-based care, to help with any of the VA wait times and travel distances, but also inside of the Mission Act was the ability for the expansion of the PCAFC and the PCGSS program. So it was going to open it up 2 more waves, pre-9/11 veterans under the expansion. So that was going to be, promulgating these new regulations to address some of the persistent problems in the program. But they were going to do this dual care as well as deploying a whole new IT system. And Ben, with your background, the challenges with IT systems. VA's been plagued for years, whether it's a new electronic health record, which is a whole other show, or pretty much any of these different IT systems. The system was plagued with problems on deployment that stalled the rollout of the Vietnam era, Korean War era, World War II era veterans. But there was also another expansion in there, Ben, that moved away from just being traumatically injured to allow for individuals that were suffering severe illnesses. It really set a new parameter around the 70% disability rating, whether it was a single 70% standalone or a combination of conditions resulting in a 70%. So it created a threshold of a 70% disability to be able to have eligibility under the new programs. And, unfortunately, we saw more and more problems again. And what we began to see as VA began to deploy these is rather than focusing on the adjudication of new applicants into the program, they began to deploy their clinical review teams into the reauthorizations and reassessments. So they put all their effort into really taking people out of the pool of potential applicants. And one of the things that they were doing that really, I think, has frustrated everybody in there was some of the new rules that they put out were around the definition of activities of daily living, right? So they began to look at an inability to perform an activity of daily living, and the new rules that they promulgated basically said each time. So, when we look at activities of daily living, these are things like being able to, dress oneself, feed oneself, shower, toilet, so personal hygiene.
Those were the questions that were asked to me. And right then I could tell during my interview, this is not going to, they didn't care that I had to take 100 units of a medicine and I had no way of looking at the needle, so I have to listen to the clicks. They don't care that I have to look at the pill bottles and, trust on a script talk. And there's a lot of flaws with script talk. They didn't care about any of that information. It was all about, can you bathe yourself? Can you dress yourself? And that's not the main issue.
So you bring up the unique challenges for the blindness community, right? So whenever we're dealing, and we talk about blindness because it's the areas that we focus and what you and I contend with on a daily basis, and our ability to perform a lot of these types of activities independently, right? It doesn't mean we can't do it. And that's a problem with anybody with a disability. We have folks that are catastrophically disabled, and let's just take, 1 week. Let's say that individual has to transfer from a wheelchair 4 times a day, times 7 days, it's 28 times. If that individual is able to do it just one time in that 28-day period, or, one time within the year, they're automatically eliminated from the program because it has to happen each and every single time. Yeah, our concern is that ADLs, activities of daily living, in and of themselves do not capture the challenges of the blind, visually impaired, as well as some folks that are dealing with some other cognitive types of disabilities and things along those lines. We have been, working with the teams that are working on the new regulations to look at IADLs, independent activities of daily living, which go a step further down to really begin to look at things like, for us, we have a lot of technology that helps our lives, but, we still have challenges matching clothes and doing some of the things around the clothing sides. And there's just a lot of different areas, to your point, Ben. The challenges are there that we are dependent upon a sighted person to ensure our safety and our well-being.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, so we definitely want to see those expansions come out in some of the new regulations.
In the first segment, I was talking about, I'm a diabetic, I'm legally blind, and even though the Script Talk is a great product, but if you are putting pill bottles on the table and they're too close to each other, you're going to get a false reading. I can't see my feet as a diabetic. I can't see if I'm getting an ulcer or not before it's too late. So these are things that, my wife has to do for me or someone else. That's a caregiver responsibility to help. I can bathe myself, but I can't see what pill I'm taking. I can trust maybe the Script Talk is correct, but I've already, for many times, there's a flaw in the Script Talk. So if I put a pill bottle down on the table and it's too close to the Script Talk, I'm going to hear prednisone 4 times.
Yeah, and then to further complicate that, we have individuals that we've represented through the Blind and Veterans Association who, human error still factors in, as does machine error. So, sometimes prescriptions are mislabeled. So Script Talk might be working, but there could be mislabeling a medication that a blind person isn't necessarily going to be able to differentiate. That can lead to some of those same types of challenges and concerns for all of us.
Yeah, I take a transplant medicine. Can you imagine if I take 4 of those in one day instead of 1?
Yeah. Unfortunately, then we're dealing with the NCA, National Cemetery Administration, and no longer concerned with the VHA or VBA, which nobody wants to contend with at those
not at all.
points in time.
So before we move on, let's go back just for a second. So the present criteria to be qualified for the Caregivers Act, there's 2 programs. Can you go over the present requirements and then what the BVA is hoping to get to?
Yeah, so again, pretty much anybody's eligible for the lowest tier, which is the program for general caregiver services. That is basically providing resources, and they're great resources. I certainly don't want to diminish what the VA has done to put these tools together to help our family members, because they've done a phenomenal job, and those assets and resources are out there. There's some support systems that are in place for those caregivers, but it's really to help equip them with what they need. But there's no monetary nor some of the other benefit programs that are in place. And just to further complicate the comprehensive caregiver program, that is a 3-tiered program, right? So you're looking at, in order to qualify for the highest tier, when we talk about activities of daily living in each time, that would require 3 ADLs each time in order to qualify. So you would literally not be able to perform 3 of the activities of daily living consistently in order to qualify for that highest tier. Then what we've seen is hundreds of thousands of previously eligible and enrolled families removed from the program and left languishing now in the appellate stages. And we can get into that as well, the Bodette decisions and things that went on there, and really just how convoluted this entire caregiver program has become.
I understand that, and I think this is a good stopping point. I just heard the producer in my ear there saying it's time for a little break. So if you don't mind, can you stay with us for a little bit so we can pick this back up? And for our guest, if you just stick with us, we're going to drop to the studio for a second, and we'll be back just in a few minutes. Thanks for watching us. This is Ben from Wisdom for the Blind Studios, InSight to the VA. We'll be right back.
VA's Office of Blind Rehabilitation Services estimates there are approximately 130,000 veterans in the United States who are legally blind, and more than 1 million veterans who have low vision that causes a loss of ability to perform necessary daily activities. In this era of instant communication, where we get overwhelmed with data or facts that are useless to unsighted individuals, wouldn't it be great if we could count on news focused on real problems that impact the daily lives of veterans without sight? Introducing Wisdom for Blinded Veterans, an advanced informational portal designed by blind veterans specifically for blind and vision impaired vets that, like them, are facing challenges every day. Hi, my name is Ben, and I know the frustration. I've struggled in day-to-day tasks for over 20 years since I lost my eyesight. One of my biggest challenges has always been trying to stay up to date with the latest information of my eye disease, local news, and the ever-changing technology. I wanted to be able to have one single site that merged all the data scattered And that's why we created Wisdom for Blinded Vets. This is a portal that can be accessed via the web, a smartphone app, telephone, email, text messaging, or Amazon's Alexa. It integrates with readers such as JAWS or Apple's VoiceOver and various other tools to give you a seamless experience. This portal will keep us updated on a variety of topics and will share knowledge that can help make our lives easier and more fulfilled. Highlights of the topics covered on the portal include podcasts, events, news, blind rehab and training, information on the BVA and other groups, a list of coordinator and bros list, online groups to interact with fellow vets facing the same challenges, and much more. Give us a try. You will not be disappointed. To learn more about us, visit our website www.w4bv.org. If you're interested in sharing your knowledge, please consider becoming a contributor by logging into our portal and going to the contributor section for more information. Wisdom for Blinded Veterans, transforming blind veterans' lives.
Veterans deserve as much help as they can get. They put their lives on the line for their country, and yet there's still an ongoing mental health crisis among military veterans that needs to be addressed. Well, if you're a veteran who wants the support of fellow veterans and to support fellow veterans, join Wisdom for the Blind's Cup of Joe virtual coffee and chat. It's low-key, fun, and gives veterans an outlet to talk with others who fully understand what they're going through. Get connected at Wisdom for the Blind's website, w4tb.org/cupofjoe.
You're listening to W4TB Radio from the Wisdom for the Blind studios in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where we share some wisdom to help you navigate the seas to stay in calm waters. Please visit us on the web at w4tb.org or drop us an email at feedback@w4tb.org. You can also download the W4TB radio app at the Apple Store or Google Play. Please share the knowledge and tell a friend. Now, back to the show.
Well, thanks for sticking with us. This is Ben with our guest, Don, from the BVA, and we appreciate you returning. Hey, Don, right before we left, we were getting into, you made a statement that people are getting kicked off the program, and I've had a lot of vets come to me saying that, they were asked to renew or they moved and they had to renew and they're getting denied. And some of the reasons that they're getting is because they've been trained or this isn't an issue anymore. What's happening with all that? Why are they getting denied if they've had it for 20 years and now they're denied?
So just to really level set and to be clear, the Caregiver program, the legislation itself actually stipulates that VA has the authority and should, they really and truly should, revisit individuals that are in the program that have eligibility requirements. If we take into consideration, I can use myself as an example. When I was medevac out of theater and back into Walter Reed, I was much more disabled then than I am today. I've been very blessed to be able to use the Department of Veterans Affairs Blind Rehabilitation Service program to equip myself with different types of technology and independent skills to lead as independent of a life as I possibly can. But again, just because we have the ability to perform certain activities of daily living, that doesn't necessarily mean that there shouldn't be eligibility for some of the program's services that were intended to be here to, again, ensure the best quality of life. So VA is always going to look back, right? They're always going to come back and revisit. One of the things that we've been pushing for with the other VSOs is, when you look at something like blindness doesn't tend to improve. If somebody goes in and has a surgical procedure, and that surgical procedure is a success, then yes, by all means, if somebody has some restoration of visual acuity, then there should be a revisit. But for somebody who remains entitled and eligible for blind rehabilitation service under the BRS directives within the Veterans Health Administration, and we have extensive case management through the Visual Impairment Service Team coordinators. If there's no change in status, then the family shouldn't be put through the hardship of having the annual reviews and going through all the other components. The benefits should just stay intact and in place for them. The other thing I think to your point is we never want folks to avoid, pursuing blind rehabilitation service, to be able to be equipped with any technology or any skill sets that are going to improve their quality of life, especially if it's just to try to maintain eligibility on a program that, I got to be honest with you, Ben, this program's not intended for everyone, right? There's other programs, not just the lower tiered program, but we also have under the Veterans Benefits Administration, aid and attendance. We have homebound benefits that are there. These are monetary benefits to help offset the cost of service delivery in those areas. But many of us in the blindness community, we move above the 100% threshold into what's called special monthly compensation. It's a whole different rating schedule within the Veterans Benefits Administration that creates higher levels of monetary benefits that are intended to help us to offset some of these challenges that we contend with as a result of our service-connected disability. So there's a lot of programs that are out there. I want to just make sure that folks don't avoid going and seeking some of the rehabilitative services that are out there that will improve their quality of life and that of their families as well.
So if a veteran was to move from New York to Orlando, are they required to be recertified for the Caregivers Act?
So what's interesting, and this is where I mentioned before the break, the Baudet decision, which was an interesting one, because what happened is this was a class action lawsuit by an individual who had been removed from the PCAFC program, and he appealed up to the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims, and VA contended and continues to contend that the Veterans Health Administration, these are clinical determinations. As you know, Ben, you just went through this. You went to your Veterans Affairs Medical Center. You met with clinicians. They did all of this, the entire process, whereas most benefits are adjudicated not at the VHA level, but at the VBA level. Well, the Court of Appeals agreed that ultimately these appeals should be able to go all the way up to the board and to the court to be decided. And it's another layer that we would like to see in the new regulations as they come out, is the fact that we agree that the Veterans Health Administration, these are clinical determinations, no different than any other disability compensation related adjudication, right? If I go in and I'm applying for legal blindness, I get all of my medical evidence, I bring that to the Veterans Benefits Administration, and then they apply the laws that are there, and I can appeal, I can seek a higher level review, I can appeal up to the board, I can take it through these other areas. As we're seeing with the Caregiver program, the appeals are limited at the clinical level to the Veterans Health Administration. They're not positioned for this level of appeal or this level of adjudication, and so the system is inherently flawed right from the beginning at that point. So we would like to see, yes, VHA maintains the clinical determinations, but that these claims should be adjudicated at the Veterans Benefits Administration, at the regional offices, with folks that are trained to really adjudicate these types of benefit programs.
So I've had veterans come up to me and say that, hey, Ben, I've been denied, and I heard a rumor that I can only appeal one time for a lifetime. Is that true?
So it's not a lifetime. It isn't a lifetime appeal. And again, I think the most important thing for everyone out there to understand right now is we're very close. VA has been working for the last year and a half, we'll probably be approaching 2 years or so, on the new regulations. And we're waiting to see those new regulations come out because they realize something went wrong here. Multiple secretaries previously stopped removing individuals from the program. There's been this start, stop until they try to figure out, look, basically, Ben, we've got to call an ace and a spade in everything that we do in life. Nobody realized the level of demand for these types of services. We have an aging veteran population with our Vietnam era veterans, obviously our Korean War veterans as well. We've unfortunately lost the majority of our World War II veterans. There are still some folks that are out there, that we would like to see have entitlement to these benefits, but that's really what it comes down to. There was not an expectation that this many individuals required these levels of care. It's real. A lot of families were just providing it. And then when you create a program for folks to be able to come into, then you come to the realization of how much is out there. And so when the day is done, everything always comes down to the almighty dollar, right? And how does the Congressional Budget Office score? And, really, where is that at? Our frustration, Ben, is the most cost-effective way to care for our nation's veterans is to allow their families to do it and support their families in doing so. That's why this legislation was so important. It remains important because, again, all that it's doing is equipping that family with a little bit of additional monetary support, the tools that they need to be effective quality caregivers, giving them some respite care, allowing caregivers to get some time down and decompress, to bring some professional services in for those respites, to provide the different training, give them access to health care as well for the services rendered. I'm sure it's no different in your family than in mine. Our loved ones take a back seat, whether it's professionally and in their personal lives, to ensure that our needs are being met, and they should be taken care of for those services rendered.
Oh, for sure. My wife and my daughter both, they bend over backwards to help, and, everything from making sure that, my feet don't have ulcers to making sure that I do the right medicine. So going back to the appeals, what should a veteran who's been denied do today with that? Should he or she call the BVA and speak to Dwayne or something? Or what's the next step? We've gone through, we talked about how to file, but what's the next step once they've been denied?
Yeah, and we have legislation. We always talk about legislation, and that's really what our role is as a congressionally chartered veteran service organization. Under the Appeals Modernization Act, the AMA, as most people are familiar with it, which we had signed into law back in 2017. That's where really all of these types of appellate rights and really trying to streamline that process. Again, Caregiver is caught in this really unique area in that it doesn't have the definitive touch points at the Veterans Benefits Administration, yet the court has deemed that you still have the appellate rights. And so, yes, appealing is pretty straightforward with Caregiver. We're happy, Blind Veterans Association has a team of accredited national service officers. We're more than happy to assist anyone in filing an appeal if they would like that support and that assistance. It also allows us to document and capture additional data that we use when we meet with members of Congress to discuss the challenges for our stakeholder communities. And so we welcome the opportunity to be there. Our new ambassador program, and Ben, I know you've had some touch points there. Ambassadors become force multipliers for us. These are going to be folks that we eventually will have positioned across the VA enterprise to support visual impairment service team coordinators and others. They've all had their case rosters expanded under the new BRS directives, and I'm sure they would welcome the opportunity. So our folks are going to be positioned through the community development and civic engagement programs at the local VAs, so that their volunteer hours are being counted towards service delivery to their fellow veteran brothers and sisters. And so we really look forward to doing all this. But yeah, we're standing by. We're happy to help folks drive that appellate process. And again, I think the biggest thing for everybody to realize is we're close. VA has transferred their proposed new rules and regs over. They're being reviewed. We're hoping that they'll go public relatively soon, and then we'll know where we all are, right? What is that reset going to look like? Because when the court decided that individuals that have been denied under Caregiver had appellate rights to the board, basically VA was mandated at that point to do a total reset of anyone that had been removed and offer that to them. Now VA has subsequently gone to the federal courts and attempted to have that determination overturned. They did not succeed in that. So there's just still so much. We're kind of in a wait and see. It's frustrating, right? Because so many individuals are going without these benefits that are entitled to the benefits. So it's frustrating across the board. I know nobody wants to hear the typical, hurry up and wait, but we are really in that holding pattern right now to make a determination on what our next moves are.
So if someone's been denied and they're at and 10 months into the denial, they have 1 year that they have to, or the claim gets dropped. Is that correct?
That is pretty much correct, yes.
Okay.
And again, it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of all of this to figure out exactly what that reset looks like. But that's why we encourage everyone to appeal, get the appeals in, get them processed so that they're documented. And it just positions, individuals to be able to say, I did not agree with that decision. And we're relatively confident that when the new regs are going to come out, it's going to open up greater levels of eligibility and entitlement, especially from us looking at blindness. We think we gave VA some tools to work with as they make these decisions and determinations. And again, really quick, under SMC, special monthly compensation, that we qualify for as a result of blindness, those mechanisms are there already in the VBA side that they can be applied to the PCAFC to grant, we think, a pretty straightforward decision.
Oh, great. So we're into some real good discussion right here. I want to talk about the Elizabeth Dole Act. I want to talk just a little bit more about a higher level review versus the next step. But first, the producer's been saying time to take a little break. So, Don, please stick with me for one more segment. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be right back with a great friend of mine, Don, from the Blind Veterans Association, the executive director, and we're going to continue this conversation on the Caregivers Act. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. This is Ben from Wisdom for the Blind Studios in Fort Lauderdale.
I took a musket ball in Chancellorsville.
Hi, I'm Mike Byer, Executive Director for Operation Song, where we pair Nashville's songwriters with veterans, active duty military, and their families to tell their stories through the process of songwriting. Our services are 100% free, and songwriting or musical talent is not required. For more information, check us out at operationsong.org. If you think this is something you're interested in, email us at contact@operationsong.org.
Till the last Monday in May.
Do you enjoy a good read? Or do you enjoy sharing new books with friends? Then join us on the second Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Wisdom Books, a virtual book club just for the blind or visually impaired. You can also hear a pre-recorded episode on Wisdom Radio every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. For more information, go to w4tb.org and click the link Wisdom Books for more information. And please don't forget to share the wisdom.
You're listening to Wisdom for the Blind Radio, W4TV, from the studios in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, the home of the Wisdom for Blinded Kids portal. Please enjoy the show, and don't forget to share the wisdom with a friend.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to InSight to the VA with our guest, Don Overton from the BVA in D.C. there. Don, thanks for sticking with us. Before the break, we were talking about the appeal process. So we already outlined that you have 12 months to do an appeal. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, this thing about one appeal and all that, that really doesn't apply anymore. Is that correct?
It doesn't, not since the court upheld the Baudette decision. And so VA is going to have to do a reset. And again, there's going to be a new reset for everyone once these new regulations and rules go public, because it's basically going to restructure the entire program. So anything that was adjudicated under the prior laws and language of the program then are going to be transitioned. And so they'll have to reset everything at that point in time. And then we'll probably have a cleaner understanding of what any appellate type process is going to look like.
Okay, so if a veteran was to get denied, he or she then requested a higher level review, and that was denied, that clock resets then, so then they have another year to go to the next step. Is that correct?
To some extent, yes. And keep in mind, it's no different, right, that people's conditions change constantly. And so regardless, if a denial was sent down and then the individual, as a result of natural aging or as a result of the exacerbation of a condition, worsens, they need to be reconsidered anyway. So this is constantly going to be an evolving type of a program. So you're never fully denied. Some benefits, folks realize under the Veterans Benefits Administration, some of those appeals die. And really what's dying there, Ben, is not the ability for the individual to win a case. It's really the clock, right? So it's the effective date of award of a claim. And so sometimes that's what dies, not the potential eligibility or entitlement to that benefit later in life.
Right. So what dies is if that year window goes away, then it has to be reset, but they don't get the back pay to the date that the claim was issued.
That's correct. You got it.
Okay.
That's the easiest way to put it. Yep.
Yeah. I'm just trying to make it simple for
That's it.
small guys like me.
Hey, it's the KISS principle. You Navy guys
That's
need
right.
that stuff. I know that.
Well, we have to keep it simple because we're too much partying on the beach there. Great. So I think we understand the claim process, and I think that helps a lot of our users out there that have been, concerned about what to do in this, all kinds of little rumors going on about what's going on as far as the appeals and stuff like that. So I think you covered that great. Thank you very much. So moving in the future, we hear a lot of great things on March 6th. Paul Mins was on the Hill and he talked, and at the same time, Elizabeth Dole was there, and they were talking about the Caregiver Act and the Elizabeth Dole Act. How do you think that's going to help us, and is that the right direction?
Yeah, Senator Dole is an amazing individual. I've had the honor and privilege to spend time with her in the past, and she's just done phenomenal work through her Elizabeth Dole Foundation since she's separated from public service. And she's really focused on the caregiver and the caregiver journey. Obviously, as many of your listeners will relate, her husband, the late Senator Bob Dole, catastrophically disabled as a result of his military service. And so his wife had been there by his side and really served as a caregiver for him for the better part of his life and his public service. So just two great Americans that have done phenomenal work. A couple things that are going to confuse people, right? So we have the Elizabeth Dole Act, but what you're going to see is right now when we deal with legislative sausage making on Capitol Hill, sometimes we move legislative packages, which are going to be multiple bills that move under a single act. And that's what's going to happen with the Elizabeth Dole Act, is there's going to be multiple pieces of legislation that will move underneath that. But when we look at the caregiver component of that, it's going to improve the program in many different areas, but it's only going to be an improvement for folks that are in the program, right? So one of the mechanisms that's in there is if folks are either determined to no longer be eligible for PCAFC, then there'll be an automatic trigger, which doesn't exist right now. Right now, if somebody is denied PCAFC eligibility, which again is the Comprehensive Assistance for Family Caregivers, they're not automatically enrolled in the program for general caregiver support services. So the Elizabeth Dole Act will create a mechanism that would automatically move those individuals into that other program, ensuring that they have access to all of those different resources that are going to be available. They're also going to utilize a standardized assessment tool to help assess the needs of the family and recommend specific home and community-based services. So they're looking to begin to try to help this adjudicated process at the clinical level to be able to look at really and truly, these different individuals, and hopefully, this will help create some consistency, uniformity, whatever term we want to use across the enterprise. Because right now, Ben, for folks that travel, and you brought it up a couple times, right? Somebody going from New York to Florida, if you've been to one VA, you've been to one VA. It's all falls under the Department of Veterans Affairs, but each facility operates differently. Each VISN, each Veterans Integrated Service Network that oversees, different regions of the country operate differently. I always refer to them as little mini fiefdoms because to some extent they are. And some of that's just because of the different, whether it's geographically based or culturally based service delivery and things along those lines. But anyway, requiring this new standardized assessment tool might help the clinicians to better determine eligibility entitlement as well as the tiers, right? We talk about the multiple tiers within the PCAFC. So hopefully that'll do that. It's going to require that VA develop a digital hub for caregiver resources. So this will basically be similar to a lot of other tools that exist in the world today, caregivers will be able to log in and basically have access to everything that they need electronically. So whether or not that's connecting, with support groups, whether it's accessing care or finding providers that are in network, things along those lines, it'll create all of those. We talked about the expansion of VA home-based community services across those lines. It's going to also require VA to produce a report with recommendations on how VA might expand mental health services and support for caregivers. And then it's going to bring in the nonprofit and the veteran service organizations as partners in the entire process. I think the most frustrating thing for all of us, Ben, and it's the reason why you're doing this, and you've mentioned it as well, is where the VA, I think, has really and truly failed in this program is its lack of transparency. It's just not providing data. It's not putting out the information. It seems to be this veiled program that nobody can get behind the curtain and really understand everything that's happening. And it's very unfortunate when a federal agency fails to produce data. And we've all been requesting data. We wanted to know, how many blinded veterans have been removed off of the PCAFC and how many denials. We can't get any of that data. And usually when we do data requests with VA, we get it for pretty much everything else. So there's a lot of frustration there. So hopefully this report will, pull down that veil and we'll be able to see behind the curtain and really and truly understand what's working with the program. That's what helps us be effective advocates. Where can we improve programs legislatively? We would be the ones up, beating the halls of Congress to ensure that they are allocating the proper amount of resources to fund these programs and for service delivery. And so we've got to clearly understand what we're contending with it right now. We don't.
And as you know, that's why we started Wisdom for the Blind, was to get this information out so people can learn about it. We see the same thing with the car grants. We see that with the homing grants. It's the education, not knowing all about these programs. And you coming out here tonight to help us is great, and I appreciate it. Two things. One, what do you see is going to change as far as a blinded veteran or a vision impaired veteran, the qualifications? Are they going to get away from the cookie cutter and get to a personal model? Do you think that's going to happen?
We would like to see it, right? So we would like to see some standardization around what we already know. What are the triggers under the Veterans Benefits Administration for those special monthly compensation rates, right? Whether it's bilateral blindness with a visual field of 52, we have very specific definitions in place that create those triggers, and we think that those should be applied towards caregiver eligibility as well. It would demystify what we're contending with right now, because we would either qualify, and again, Ben, if this comes down to, if we're going to look at this multi-tiered system of how much of a stipend each veteran is entitled to, their caregiver is entitled to, then we really think there should be that level of specificity in the sensitivity and understanding what are the unique challenges associated with blindness. Blindness is different than paralysis. We all contend with the different challenges, and how do we integrate into society and have that level of independence and that quality of life. And so, we've got to figure out exactly where all of that is, but we don't have any ability to do that until we clearly understand how VA is going to deploy these new regs, or is it going to stay a multi-tiered system of benefits and really take it from there.
In your crystal ball, Don, is this a 1-year thing? Is this a 6-month thing, or is this a 5-year thing?
Before we see what we're going to?
Yeah, before we see it.
I feel relatively confident we should see these new regs out in the very near future. So I'm thinking 30 to 60 day
That's fabulous.
time frame.
That's great.
Yeah, so at least then we'll know, then with and again, we've been engaged. BVA has been invited to the table, as have our sister associations, DAV, the Legion, VFW, everyone out there. We've been meeting with the leadership at VA as they've been working on this, and they've listened to us. I think that there's a level of sensitivity that's there, and they brought in the subject matter experts as well. We know that ophthalmology, optometry, all of those folks in the professional associations as well that represent those care providers have been involved as well. So I do think that they've done their due diligence. Now we'll have to see. We'll have to really and truly see what comes out of this very extensive process. We're hopeful, but we'll see.
I really appreciate what you're saying. And, as we wrap things up, what can our brothers and sisters do today, Don, to help move this forward? Is there anything that they can do? Can they write their congressman? What actions can they help? Because they've got a stake in it too. What do you need them to do?
The biggest thing is if an individual out there feels as if they should have entitlement to the caregiver program based on the way that the program is designed, and it's designed to be a much broader umbrella than it currently is, then apply for the benefits. Because if you're not part of that data set, then the demand isn't there, right? And we need the demand there. So if you believe that you should have entitlement, please apply for the program. And then appeal if you're denied, when you're denied. And appeal, yes, it's frustrating, but again, the data is going to help drive things. Then the next move is going to be when we see the new regs come out and we look and we assess and we will convene, I'm sure, with all of the different veteran service organizations and military service organizations. If there's concerns around the regulations, then we'll look for legislative solutions. And at that point in time, BVA is really good at deploying grassroots advocacy tools. An individual will put a call to action out that we'll share with your team. It's a simple process of putting your name and your address in, and it will create the letters for you, customized to your congressional delegation. And that's what it becomes, to your point. Then you are participating in advocacy, you're lobbying Congress for benefits that you believe well-deserved, and that's the best way to take action.
I can't say it any better. Thank you very much for that. And you know what I'm going to do, Don? Tomorrow morning, I'm going to send my paper up. I'm going to talk to the office of your team there, and I'm going to file my appeal because I've been sitting on it until you and I talked, but it's time to stop sitting, time to start acting.
We look forward to representing that for you, Ben. We welcome that opportunity, and anyone else out there will welcome the opportunity as well.
That sounds good. Anything that we missed, Don, when we get ready to wrap things up here that you think we should talk about on the Caregivers Act?
Yeah, no, I think right now, Ben, we've all just got to, collectively take a deep breath, wait just a little bit longer. Let's see where this settles at. We're very, very close. Again, I gave a broader window. I think it'll be sooner. I don't want anybody coming back saying, but you said it was going to be in 60 days. Now, something happened.
You don't think our brothers and sisters would do that, do you?
No, never. But no, we do think it'll be sooner than that. So yeah, it's just be in a slight holding pattern right now, and then let's all come back together and have a conversation. Let's analyze the new regulations. Let's look at what mechanisms are available, and then we would welcome the opportunity to help guide your listeners through next steps. Right? What should folks do that have been denied? What should folks do that had appeals? Now, when the new regs come out, let's look at what are the best approaches towards ensuring that individuals maximize their entitlement and eligibility for these benefits.
Well, I appreciate your words there. And I want to finish with a few things. So, as everybody knows, Don, you're the executive director. I'm an ambassador for, Southern Florida for the BVA. The BVA is a great organization. It's really helped. It helped me with my personal claim to the VA. So it really helped. And I appreciate everything you're doing.
Yeah, Ben, I think you were a couple of decades fighting that one, weren't you?
Oh, yeah. It was a long process, and we got it knocked off pretty quick. Now, doesn't mean that I'm not going to come back to you with my granddaughter issue, which we've talked about. And we're going to do that real quick.
One as well. Absolutely.
We're going to be doing that real quick. But I wanted to just, real quick, let's talk about the BVA. I understand, now is the opportunity for you guys to join if you're not a member of the BVA, because you have a special program going on until June, if I'm not mistaken. And you're the voice.
Until June, and it's been extended a little bit, Ben. As a matter of fact, it's been so successful that the original donors' resources have almost been exhausted. So we did have someone step up that donated a significant sum of money to offer free memberships to ensure that if it was money, that wouldn't be an impediment to somebody finding fellowship and camaraderie and opportunities to connect with their fellow veterans and have that representation that's there and support this association. I think the unique thing about Blinded Veterans Association is we are the only congressionally chartered veteran service organization uniquely representing blind and low vision veterans. And so that gives us a very powerful voice in Congress to help steer legislation. And we're only as strong as our representation. It's the membership. This association is driven by its member base. And so you're only as strong as your members. And we talked earlier about the loss of our World War II veterans and so many others. And when we lose entire generations, it impacts your numbers. So we've got another donor that stepped up that's going to match the original. And so it'll probably be extended. We hope it'll be extended through convention. So more to follow. But as long as folks go to BVA, that's BravoVictorAlpha.org, hit the Join Us tab. You'll see that on there. And when you start the process of just filling out an accessible online form, you'll see free membership, and it'll stay there for the foreseeable future. We'll see how many more weeks we're lucky, but we've definitely had a run on it, Ben. I've been pleasantly surprised by the number of new applicants.
Well, I know that I've seen an increase. I have the pleasure of speaking to veterans all over the state of Florida. And I'm sorry, Don, but I tell them, hey, this is an organization that stands up for you. It's your voice. I give them examples like what you guys have done with my claim, what you've done for my family. I said, money's not an issue anymore. These people are here to help. They're your representation. It's a no-brainer. So I'm glad that you got another donor. And if anyone needs help, we got links to do that. And I just commend everybody to support, by all you got to do is sign a piece of paper. And, you get to meet some great brothers and sisters and have great friendship. So I just wanted to tell you that, Don. And I appreciate your time. You and I have been working together for a few years now. And it's a great little partnership that we have going on. I appreciate it. I enjoy the opportunity that I have through the BVA as an ambassador. And I think it all just works together. And thanks very much from my heart, Don, for coming in and listening and talking with us.
We appreciate you. Thanks for all you're doing, Ben, and your advocacy. We look forward to any opportunities to continue to create some synergy amongst our efforts. We're all in this together. So. Well,
thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a great opportunity to understand the Caregivers Act. InSight to the VA, we addressed all kinds of different issues, and this was one that we needed to talk about. Please, if you have any questions, reach out to your local BVA reps. A lot of ambassadors all throughout the United States. Give us a call at Wisdom. We got a great staff that will lead us in the right direction to whatever, we need to get your questions answered. If you have a question, you can send it to info@w4, that's the number 4tv.org, and we're going to do the best that we can to support you. Continue to find us all over the place, Apple, Spotify, and Amazon. Thank you for joining us. We're going to throw it over to the studio. They're going to give us a little update on some programs that are going on. But this has been Ben. Don, thanks for joining us. This is Wisdom for the Blinds, InSight to the VA. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Ben. And to our listeners, thank you for dropping in today to listen to InSight to the VA with Benjamin Keeley and Donald Overton. Now to our first story. The Elizabeth Dole Home Care Act, H.R. 542, is a bill that addresses home care and caregiver programs provided by the Department of Veterans Affairs. The Elizabeth Dole Home Care Act requires the Department of Veterans Affairs to establish agreements with outside providers to furnish medical and social services to veterans who are not in VA nursing homes. This bill also requires the VA to improve in-home assistance and support for caregivers of veterans and raise the limit on expenses for nursing home care provided outside of VA facilities. Lastly, the bill would require the VA to conduct several studies related to medical and health services for elderly veterans and report on those topics. All veterans, including those who are disabled, aging, or visually impaired, want to be cared for in their home, with their families, and in their communities. And deserve to be cared for in their home, with their families, and in their communities. With the new year here, Wisdom for the Blind has announced the new Lunch and Learn schedule for both the third and fourth quarters. Please be sure to visit the website, w4tv.org, to see if a Lunch and Learn is happening near you. Lastly, Wisdom for the Blind will be launching 2 new podcasts. One being the new InSight to Fitness podcast with host Benjamin Keeley and Tyler Marin. And a new episode of InSight to Travel with Benjamin Keeley and David Coe. Don't forget to share the wisdom with a friend. Thank you to our listeners and the Wisdom for the Blind studio. Now back to you, Ben.
Hi, I'm Christina Hepner. And I'm Leslie Hoskins, and we're hosts of the Taking the Lead podcast from Leader Dogs for the Blind.
Our podcast provides insight into the blindness community and impactful stories from our clients.
At Leader Dog, we continue to be the answer for thousands who need our free services. These include guide dog training, white cane training, and more. Once clients complete training, they're reintroduced to a life of safety and independence.
Learn more at leaderdog.org.
Looking for a fitness app that is accessible for the blind? Well, look no further. Revision Fitness is just what the trainer ordered. This audio and text-based fitness program has a wide selection of fitness options, including cardio, strength, yoga, balance, flexibility, and even progressive relaxation sessions. Download Revision Fitness on the App Store or Google Play, or visit revisionfitnessapp.com and get a free 14-day trial for new users. Find your fit with Revision Fitness. And as always,
Revision Fitness.
Let's change the way we look at it.
You're listening to W4TB Radio from the Wisdom for the Blind studios in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where we share some wisdom to help you navigate the seas to stay in calm waters. Please visit us on the web at w4tb.org or drop us an email at feedback@w4tb.org. You can also download the W4TB radio app at the Apple Store or Google Play. Please share the knowledge and tell a friend. Now, back to the show.
Hey, Allie, that was great information. And I really appreciate everything you guys are doing in the studio. And ladies and gentlemen, I personally want to thank a good friend of mine, Don Overton, the Executive Director of the Blind Veterans Association, Executive Director there. I just want to thank you for joining us tonight. It was a great topic, all about Caregivers Act. Hey, a lot of things that people have been asking me. We think we covered it. Listen to the podcast, re-listen to it, tell a friend, share the wisdom. And if you have another topic that you want, let me know. We're going to put it on the air. Once again, this is Ben from the studio. I want to thank our producer, Bree. Great job. Thank you very much. Allie in the studio and the rest of the team. We got Grace and Taylor. Everybody, thanks for all your hard work. And once again, don't forget to share the wisdom. We'll see you back soon.
You've been listening to InSight to the VA. The VA is there for veterans like us, but sometimes it can be difficult for people to navigate. And that's why we're here. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like, rate, and review. And make sure to tell a friend or two. That would help as well. Produced by Wisdom for the Blind and VNS Productions, a division of VNS International. From the Wisdom for the Blind studios in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, this is InSight to the VA. Signing off.